pressing on because it takes a bit of time, but I will give you breaks and what have you. Just to stretch your legs. It's still coming under the weight if you know. Anybody wants to ask a question in the interim or whatever? Nothing for the moment. Good. Okay, so we move on to Elaine Ingham's work, the Soil Food Web, soilfoodweb.com, and you guys can all look this up. I think she puts it in good detail as to what we're working with. There's more life under the soil than above the soil, but the beauty is we as people on the land can manipulate it. So we look at that because it's the grass, the base of the grass plant, soil surface, subsoil, and we can manipulate the organic matter and the plant shoots and roots as to what we achieve. Okay? So in working with that, we manipulate the fungal bacterial relationship in the soil. And I've already told you what grows on the soil is a mirror image of what is in the soil. So we can shift that in either direction. I'm just waiting for people to finish photographs if they want to talk. So we go to this diagram, and here up at the top you have their parent material, which is 100% bacterial. So where you guys have gone up the mountains and plowed, you have changed that land to 100% bacterial because you have wanted to control it. In most countries in the world, they block you up for disturbing the soil on that gradient, and they throw the key away. And I was horrified when I got here to see what was happening. So, it's not my business to criticize, so I will go on. Their parent material, 100% bacterial, and we move to weeds, high nitrate, lack of oxygen, and you've seen that in paddocks with those little yellow flowers in, particularly if it's areas that flood on a regular basis. It's anaerobic microbes in the soil. We get early grasses there, and your ryegrass is around about early grasses. And as we move around, we get mid grasses and vegetables, late successional grasses and row crops, a one-to-one, which you'll see later, but that's where we want to be. And we go on, we do shrubs, vines, bushes, and cotton. So you guys are growing your gorse and your brush, whatever you've got on the hillside, you here, and you're moving there. You've allowed it to happen because you haven't got enough animal impact to move it to bacterial. And then we go to old growth forests, maybe not conifers and the old bush, but of course they're planting conifers. Elaine Ingham had it in a linear format. When I went to Yellowstone National Park, conifers had burnt. It was sterile soil for 3 years, and the first thing that grew, so it went to bare soil, the first thing that grew were conifers. So I put it in a different format. So we can manipulate it in either direction, and that is the fungal bacterial relationship in each group that will grow those plants if that's what you want. So having done this with livestock, I came across Betsy Ross, who's Texas Sustainable Agriculture, who uses compost tea for all the bunny huggers who don't want livestock on their land. She goes in and sprays with compost tea to adjust the fungal bacterial relationship to achieve what she wants to grow on the property. I was doing exactly the same with livestock, and just meeting and being able to communicate, it took both of us to the next level of understanding because it reinforced what we had found worked for us, that somebody else had done it coming from a different direction. So you got a clover grass pasture here with numerous varieties of plants. Diversity creates stability. So we move on and we look at density and we manage it with electric fencing or some form of fencing. In some countries we can't use fencing because there are elephants and we just herd. And in actual fact we are achieving better results from herding than we are from fencing. So we move on, and that's what's happening there. They're being herded. This is in Zimbabwe. Elephant, lion, leopard, all sorts of problems. You guys live in cuckoo land here. It's just too easy. But the wrong here is that they're eating grass that is already seeded. So it's no longer in a vegetative state. And that's why they asked me to come in and help. They've got 6 herds of 2,000 head per herd being herded. And the limiting factor to the size of the herd is water. And again in Texas, sheep get fat, no supplementation, no deworming. And this guy in Henrietta, Texas, in that herd there are 3,800 head. He started with 1,800 head on his property. He went to 3,800 head. This last year he was 6,800 head on the same farm, people. And just him and the Mexican moved them 4 times a day. He is paid on game. He only uses stockers. He's got them on the property for 10 months. And for 2 months he goes on holiday. His hobby is bird shooting, and that's what he does. I don't care where you are, it works. Even in the highlands in South Africa, there's a country called Lesotho, which is above the tree line. There are no trees up there. I was asked by an aid organization to go in and see what the potential of the country was. So we did an inclusion zone, and an inclusion zone is a small area where you put large numbers of animals for a period of time to tread everything down. All life needs energy. So the action of grazing, well documented, no problem. But there are other forms of energy, and the other ones, there is no documentation, and I've just given it names. And it's kinetic energy for the one energy, which are the hooves stamping on the ground, push energy through the soil surface. But not only that, each animal, whether it be a sheep, a cow, or a human, we have an energy field around us. And when you get a large number of animals, doesn't matter what the size is, that energy field doesn't stop at the soil surface, but goes into the soil. So to try it, I suggest you make a walkway across one of your paddocks. Take all your animals and just walk them through there, and you will see what grows inside that walkway compared to what grows outside that walkway is totally different. It's because the soil has had massive amounts of energy put into it, and it brings that energy back and changes the environment at soil surface level, including with the carbon that has been trodden on the ground. Note carbon. What is carbon? It is litter. What is litter? It is dry plant material. Not only dry plant material, but zodobacter, which take the nitrogen from the air. 78% of this is nitrogen, but all you guys want to buy it. What the hell for? I don't know. So you feed your zodobacter with exactly the same thing that you feed your animals with. They want the same ration. But on top of that, they need huge amounts of carbon because zodobacter haven't got legs. They can only swim. So you put down large amounts of carbon. 1 unit of carbon holds 12 units of water. The zodobacter starts swimming. They're being fed. They do their work, and you don't need any fertilizer. So we move on with an inclusion zone, which we've done there with these gates. There are 1,000 sheep in there in an area about the size of an acre. The herders sleep next to the sheep here because of theft, and instead of going down to the valleys there where the villages are each evening, they stayed up on the mountain. Their ram lambs grew so well that they had to castrate them 2 months earlier. It was the best wool clip they'd ever clipped when we did the grazing up there. We managed the grazing. The animals stayed in those enclosures all night for 2 nights in the same place. I had to work through an interpreter. That's what the grass looked like. Now, why did the grass look like that? Because it's no different from you guys. Because when the sheep go in the first graze, there are not enough sheep. So they graze a mosaic, and the first grasses they graze on the first graze are the same grasses they graze every time the sheep go in there. Because they are the only grasses in a vegetative state. And that's what you end up with. It looks worse than what you guys have got because of the environment. So they then burn their mountains every year. They put fire to it to get rid of that brown burden, that grass that is no longer needed. And again, the same thing happens. But you guys are doing it with a mosaic. Instead of offering your sheep your whole solar panel, you're offering your sheep only 30% of your solar panel and wonder why you can't get fat sheep. Because that's all the selection they've got. The rest is available because it's not in a vegetative state. So we put the sheep in, and this is what it looked like after 2 nights. That looked like that. Lots of dung, lots of urine, everything trodden down. And in 6 weeks we grew 3 types of clovers and ryegrass. So if we go back here, look at those mountains. If you roll them down flat, what size is the solar panel on that country? It's huge. But people and livestock die like flies there every year because of starvation. No money. Just because of the way they manage. People, look in the mirror. That is the problem. So those seeds have been there for more than 150 years. Because they haven't seen clovers in those mountains for 150 years. But if all those mountains were covered in that, imagine the energy that they were capturing if they could manage correctly. Or if they did manage correctly. It's not a matter of could. But there, everybody waits for the government to give them handouts, and nothing happens. I've been up there 4 times, I refuse to go again. So we then go to a wealthy country, America. This is Utah. 1 inch of rain. Oh my goodness, it's rain. Only 1 inch of rain. Because of the way they managed. So their forefathers came through and the grass came up to the stirrups of the horse. And they've done that in a pretty short period of time. The only thing that is there is sagebush. So this is the profile we want, where the roots go down, break hands, and go deep down, distributing carbon under the soil, and we can put down carbon above the soil with livestock, and we achieve what we want to achieve. And this is what Utah looks like, just sagebush with no grass. But where we had fed animals in the wintertime with bales, look what they grew. They broke down the sage bushes, and this is what grew. This grew in 6 months, people. Isn't it pretty? But look at the sage there. There's no grass there between the plants. And look what it looked like when they grazed it. We didn't put any seeds there. The seeds are there from many, many years ago. All you need to do is change the environment with livestock at soil surface level. Period. And I think you New Zealanders will think that's unpretty and you might like to go and mow it or do something different. But remember, you are managing chaos. You want diversity. So in and flexibility. Those plants that haven't been trodden are giving something different. So when the animals come back and graze, the density is high enough that most plants have been grazed or bruised and are back on the ground, huge amounts of litter, carbon on the soil, and that's what we want. And this is last winter, the one just before, and look at the ryegrass starting to grow, and these are starting to break down, but they haven't used the density that they used to plant this the previous year. This was an inclusion zone, but it was quite a big inclusion zone. I took that photograph because it's the only green amongst the sage. Look at the capped soil. No wonder with an inch of rain it all runs off. So the more carbon we can get down there, the more moisture is going to stay on the property, the more we're going to grow. Any questions? Anybody not understand my South African accent? So we go to the guy's pivot. He's got quite a governor. So this is under his pivot, and the water comes off the mountain from melting snow, and it hardly covered by shoe, the growth. And he couldn't get the probe into the soil. That's how hard it was, because he has no carbon in his soil. So when I first arrived, I told him the next winter to put some bales out and feed these animals on the pasture, which he did, and look what happened when the remnants of the bale is there, and the probe just sunk all the way in, right up down to the bottom. At no cost other than the bale. So one of my clients in upstate New York, who has a dairy, says he now buys bales to feed the soil, and what his cows eat is incidental. Because it is cheaper to buy hay than to buy fertilizer. And he's getting more benefit from the hay than from the fertilizer, which kills soil life and doesn't prepare the soil for the next crop. So there's a line, and we couldn't work out what was happening here. This was up to my hip, yeah? And that couldn't cover my shoe. All under the same pivot, same amount of water. And eventually we worked out that his grandfather put his haystack here. And from then, there's still enough carbon here to grow that amount of food 8 times the amount that's there. Anything that is stressed breeds, people. Humans go to war, they breed like flies, and it's no different with grasses. Grasses produce seed to propagate and extend the life of that species into the future. So all we have to do is create an environment where the plants aren't stressed, and they don't go to flower at that height. They actually go to that height before they flower, because they're not stressed. So the leaves are there, and they stretch out in the sun. The leaves get broader. Look at the broadness of the leaves. The clovers get broader leaves, but count how few flowers there are, because the plants aren't stressed. There's plenty of water, there's plenty of fertility, the life in the soil is active, everything is happening, and you can do that just as easy as this guy. I couldn't stop taking photographs, I was so impressed. And that just sunk in, the probe just sunk in. Yeah, he is a bit bigger, but yeah, whatever. So that's what it looked like. So we go to New Zealand, and I was here in February, and when I left, I was actually quite concerned, because I thought maybe this country is different. You know, all you New Zealanders know it's different. And you talk and persuade us that it is different, because I never saw this on South Island. But I came to North Island, and this guy had achieved this. Look at the height of it, look at the species diversity, look at the broadness of the leaves. I promise you it's New Zealand. But look where the animals are grazing. Wherever there was carbon on the ground, there's different species, and of for selection, the animals went there to show that this has more energy, because an animal wants the energy. An animal only wants energy to live till tomorrow. It doesn't need protein. It needs protein to breathe. We want it to get protein. But to live, it just needs energy. So these grasses have got more energy than on the hillside, and you'll see other photographs with a short at the back, right next door, and the animals have eaten this first before they've gone there. So why aren't all the animals on here? Because it now smells of sheep and cattle, and they then go into there because it doesn't smell. No animal eats on its own species. So we put a few animals into a paddock, and you've all seen it. The animals walk the perimeter to see where the fence line is, and you've already lost 60% of your grazing because it smells of animal. And they only eat that grazing which smells of animal if they're pushed to eat it. It's like you eating a smorgasbord when it's been there for 3 or 4 days. And you haven't even stood in it. This is also New Zealand, and this is a guy who heard me in February, and look at the residuals, guys. His sheep are now going out of the paddock. Very few dirty tails, a little bit here and there, but basically clean tails. This is the residual that he's leaving behind. Most plants have had the one bite off the top. The energy has been harvested off the plants. There they are, 100,000 kgs per hectare. And in a week's time he's putting another 100,000 kgs together with that one, and we'll do 200,000 kgs per hectare. And guys, he's growing more than enough food for all his animals, and he's starting to leave out paddocks because he can't get round. And that's what you do, because you've got to graze in a vegetative stage. So you start grazing, and as you graze, so you go, and the minute your first paddock is starting to lose its vegetative status, you bring the animals back to that. And don't worry about the rest, because it's security if you've made a mistake. It's still got food on it. Sorry, do you want to close that? Make it back. Put a table against it so it doesn't worry you. So we go back to making sure we graze in a vegetative stage. And he wanted to put his animals in, he wanted to put his beef animals in there. And then I was asked by somebody else, are there ever any herds in the wild with 2 species in them? And they're not. Never have I seen it. So immediately I thought, well, there's something wrong here, because now I keep saying, the closer you mimic nature, the better off you are. So why put cattle in there? So I quickly phoned him and I said, I think what you need to do is put your cattle in first. They select what they want, and 12 days behind your cattle, I think you put your ewes and lambs. And then behind your ewes and lambs, before the cattle come in again, you probably use the 25-30 day recovery period. Because you are overgrazing when the sheep go in, but if you want extra energy, that is the time you go back, because those plants have all been bruised and the energy has gone through the soil surface with kinetic energy, symbiotic energy. The soil life is bringing the energy back into the plant, and you wanting those sheep to get maximum energy, so you come in 12 days later, because the bricks, if you test that grass, are going to be higher. Yes, sir.
That's good advice. We're away with a lot of game here, and they're always 10 to 12 days behind the run. That's where they go to browse.
Exactly the same at home. I've got cattle, and the hunter will come along, and the first thing the hunters do is say, where the cattle? Because at home, 15 days behind the cattle, there, all the animals they want, 16 species, they can shoot what they like. So I'm not so keen on the fluids now, because if you get the densities right, there's no room for the other species. But the big species goes in front, bruises, out, you've never seen cattle before. Because I think in this country, cattle have always sucked the hind tip, you know, they've always been given the worst grazing. Excuse the language, ladies.
What, so what's the date? 12 days or 15 days? Well,
Yeah, well, I don't know, I don't spend enough time here, you guys must look at your pastures and decide which you like, whether it's 12 here because you're a bit more brittle in South Island, but I think it'll be more towards 18, 20 days, yeah? But certainly not your 40 days or 45 days. That will be for behind the sheep, you give that to get the grass to fully recover. But again, you monitor, so you monitor the grass, you've got a plastic dropper next to it, you pull the leaf up that's been cut off where it was grazed, you make a mark and you put the date there, and you drive around, and next week when you come past, you lift it up, and as it grows, so the plant is, you put a dropper next to it, and you make a mark, and you write the date, and then the plant grows a bit. So it's still got a flat top to it, and again it's, you pull it up and it's, you make a mark and it's the date, until this one then gets to a point, because it is now starting to recover, it's come to a point. So again you make that mark and the date, and then you start looking into the plant and you start looking for that flower that's coming through, and that is when that plant is starting to lose its vegetative state, and you need to bring the animals in to eat it. You really understand this?
With that rotation you're talking about with cattle, sheep, cattle, I take it with that 12 to 15 days you're probably not talking full plant recovery though, are you?
Depends where you are.
Well,
That's what I'm saying. You must test it for your area. I'm not here long enough to know how many days recovery you need.
so you'd still be looking for full recovery.
You need full recovery after the sheep. With the sheep, you don't necessarily need full recovery because they're going to be grazing high bricks grasses. So in other words, the energy from the soil has come through into the grass to lift those grasses and repair them from the damage. They'll be extremely high in bricks, which is mostly energy. And you'll use the lambs, and I would prefer it if you didn't even wean your ewes. Just left them there with the lambs on them until you ship them.
what about beef only where you haven't got your sheep following them?
Sorry?
What about beef only when you haven't got sheep following them? You're still going to need that recovery period.
Yes, well then you build in the recovery. If you haven't got sheep, you build a recovery for cattle, which can be a bit longer.
So it's going past that maximum point where your bricks are at, but you're getting it back in.
Correct. So you leave it a bit longer, so you're missing the bricks, but you've got more volume because the animals can overeat by 40% to create, to fix a deficiency.
So it doesn't matter that it's in the seed state, it's still enough.
Well, seed, you don't want to go more than 20%. You know, if you go out there and look at your pasture, you don't want more than 20% seed because then you've lost it. So all energy is use it or lose it. You want to get in there and use it. But if you're working with just animals, you must understand that you must increase density. You want to tread more. The more you tread, the better the result is going to be in the future. You're not wasting, you're investing in your future. Yes, ma'am.
So once it's gone to flower or seed,
Sorry.
once it's developed seed or flowers, it's not finished. What happens next? Like, is that out for the whole season, that plant, or?
Basically, it's
does
after
it
the season.
Yeah.
Because what happens is the energy goes into the seed and back in the soil to prepare it for that plant for next season.
Right.
So you want to take it off at that stage, it's still in a vegetative stage. And even if the flower has started to come, the animal biting it will put that plant back into a vegetative stage.
So if you don't catch it in time, what do you do?
Well, if you can't catch it in time, or what happens with most people, they haven't got the density, So they graze a mosaic. So the areas that have now gone to seed and areas that are the right length, preferably come in with a mower and cut it at 9 inches to bring it all back to a vegetative state. The pillar power is talking.
Yeah.
The woman talk while you're asleep there and tell you all sorts of
No,
things.
no.
I call that pillar
I
power.
was wondering that. Okay.
Sorry, you'll get one up later.
So, can I ask a question?
You may.
So why sheep, and why cattle first and then sheep and not the other way around?
Because cattle bruise it and take different stuff,
Okay.
and sheep you want higher energy. Because you've got the lambs there and you guys are wanting to fatten lambs. And then I'll go, as I said earlier, I'd like you to leave the lambs with the ewes until you actually ship them. You know, there's nothing in the wild that gets weaned. It's only a human action. We wean stuff because we think that
They need preferential treatment, but as I said right at the beginning, really every animal, including the lamb, including the ewe, deserves the best. So just give them that. Because you can. Your solar panel is there and we're not using enough of the solar panel. So what I'm talking about in terms of mosaic, and instead of dividing that into paddocks, I'm just going to leave it as a whole property, and after you graze, you've got a mosaic. All over your property of grass that hasn't been grazed because you haven't got the densities right. Next time you come and graze, you are only giving your animals 30% opportunity to graze, because they're not going to graze where it's gone to seed. They might eat the odd seed, but not really graze. You've all seen it. But you will be horrified at how many animals you need. More questions? Yes, sir.
If we've got 1,000 ewes and about 1,500 lambs, how many cattle do we need?
I like by weight to have as many cattle as sheep if possible. But if you haven't got any cattle, who cares? You just manage with your sheep.
So what sort of weight are you talking about?
Live weight.
No, weight, yeah, live weight per,
Well, you know
Per
what
area.
your sheep weigh, you know what
Yeah.
your cattle weigh.
yeah.
I don't know, in our country it's 6 sheep
Yeah.
roughly to an animal.
Yeah, so for this intense grazing, how much weights do,
I won't go there,
yeah,
because I don't know your property.
yeah.
I don't know your grasses, I don't know your soils. So you practice, you do an inclusion zone, which is a small paddock where they come into the paddock, you make it with electric fence.
Yeah.
You do not need water in it. Put the animals into the inclusion zone, just so they've trodden everything down, and let them out into the paddock to graze. Then next time you make another paddock next to that, and you take bales of hay and you lay it over the green grass in that little paddock, that inclusion zone. And you put everything in there to tread everything down with the included extra bales, extra carbon in the soil. And then you observe, paddock 1 is the bales, paddock 2 is just green grass, and paddock 3 is what you've been doing normally in grazing. And all 3 of them will show up totally different results. And then you can choose what you want. Sorry, I will not give recipes because recipes lead to disaster. I don't know your property. You must do the investigation. I talk about principles, and that's good enough for me. And it has to be good enough for you.
Yeah, just one, is it okay to keep the plant in a vegetative state sort of ongoing, or should it go to a seed cycle?
As much as you will try and keep it in a vegetative state, there will always be something seeding. There's enough seed never to purposely grow another seed in your life. So, in terms of that,
Well, really, what you're saying is you only introduce seed if you want to change species. Sorry. You only reseeding or introducing seed if you're going to want to change the species.
I wouldn't
don't even buy any seed, because the best seed for your property is already there. It's just that you haven't got the right fungal bacterial relationship for that seed to germinate and grow into a plant, and or you haven't got enough carbon on the soil to hold water, moisture for that plant to actually get into a young plant. It might germinate, but it dies. And in most cases, that's what happens. Certainly in our country, that's what happens. So in terms of what I was talking about, so I will use what's happening in Zimbabwe as an example, where we graze from the water and the animals graze. Okay, as soon as that starts losing its vegetative stage, they come back. Don't worry about all this on the outside. This is all grass food. Instead of baling it, you've got it standing on the ground. And the animals can go back in there when you need it, if you make a mistake. Because everybody's terrified of making a mistake. I probably got hurt because I just went to it. Does everybody understand the principle? So if you hear, and that's losing its vegetative stage because of whether you go back, don't worry about this one. Because when you're going into the non-grain season, go from here, now you're grazing non-grain grass, you graze what you graze in the grain season first, and your first graze in the non-grain season, and as you go past here, you're wanting to include, because you're not going to have enough food, you have one day here, one day here, one day there, one day here, one day there, one day here. Because in that time, the bacteria in the rumen haven't got time to change. So we want to use the best bacteria for the best grass. And we go in and we use the inferior bacteria for the inferior grass. It's not that they're good or bad, I'm just trying to describe it. Because it takes them about 5 days to change. Let me describe it. You can see some places there not really contemplating what I'm saying. What happens conventionally is you go into a paddock and you graze it till it's finished. So what happens there, that is the deterioration of the species of grass. So every 5 days, the bacteria are changing. We've got good bacteria dealing with good grass, and we've got bad bacteria dealing with bad grass. Then we go in there and we change the paddock. So what happens is we change the paddock, and in one day we go right back up to here, and so we carry on. But at the end of the non-grain season, our average level of nutrition has only been here, because the bacteria haven't got time to go from bad to good, so you lose that nutrition. So what you do is you take one graze. If your non-grain season is 120 days, every 60 days you come back and graze, and you graze all the paddocks, so you are grazing a paddock 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. So you've got 10 paddocks. You grazed all those paddocks, you've used the good bacteria, and you're now going into the next graze for 10 paddocks. And then in your drought reserve or waiting for rain, you write at the bottom, where do you need to supplement? There, instead of all the way through the non-grain season. It saves you a bunch of money.
So locking those paddocks up that you can't get to. Sorry, locking those paddocks up that you can't get to because everything's growing faster than you can eat.
Yeah.
Leave that stuff up on the hill for winter.
And don't graze it.
And don't graze it at all.
but put the
Don't
animals.
worry about baling stuff down on the flats. Graze that through the spring and the summer, lock the winter stuff up.
So some guy on South Island did just that. His mountains are extremely steep, and I told him to concentrate on his best ground. So he put the animals up there during the winter, set stocked them, just closed the gate. And what has grown there this spring is unbelievable, because all of that growth has gone onto the ground, whether trodden by animals or snow, and what's coming through that, because of all the carbon, is a totally different composition.
Was he supplementing when they were up there?
He didn't supplement anything.
So wouldn't
Just because of selection, big area, no selection. There was bush in it, it was quite diverse. That was amazing. Sorry.
Well, the sheep will start to look really good for the first half of the winter, then as they get down to sort of grazing the bad bacteria and stuff, they would start to deplete quite badly, wouldn't they?
But remember, you still got half your property with good grazing, and you only use half of your good grazing before you go to that grazing, and then you come back from the good grazing and you come back here to your second best grazing.
You're slowly working down the bacteria versus.
Yeah. Guys, the problem is we have difficulty in looking at it because it is so complex. And we still think in a linear format, and yet that's what we've got to do. Does everybody understand that it's just a small thing that saves you a bunch of money? Shout when you want me to stop, but I'm still happy to carry on. So, even the dairy cows, the cows have improved, but you can see the mosaic there. And again, as I told this person, and people, when I tell you what I see, I'm not being critical. I've got to show you to get you to understand what I'm talking about. She's only actually giving about a 50% opportunity for her animals to graze most plants.
Because the reason for that?
Because the plants that they grazed last time are more vegetative than the plants they didn't graze. So most of those plants, as you can see in the foreground here, are just going to seed, but they prefer the vegetative plants. And you guys have seen it. You watch animals and it happens. So we go to my property in South Africa. That is mine and that is mine. This I leased out. I leased out 2/3 of my property, people. Because literally I was like a fox terrier pissing on the corner post, and excuse the word, I didn't have enough animals. I killed animals with too much grass. They died. The minute I took all the animals and put it on 1/3 of the land, I started to get results, and eventually that's what it looked like on the left. That's me. I've got 6 times the stocking rate as the guy on the right. It's both my land. But land is a solar panel, and you've got to harvest the energy like with a solar panel. Its energy is money. So this side is bringing in that constant money that I don't need to work for. And on the left, I was running a herd at that time of about 2,500 cows and their calves. And look at the colour. I didn't put fertilizer on. There are too many rocks in our place to put fertilizer. But that is Zodobacter working, and the species will change as you move forward and capture more energy. So we look from the other side of the hill and give you a better example, conventional, and what I was managing. But the neighbor then says, oh, the rain stopped on the fence line. And guys, that's what people believe. But you know that. So we go to Oklahoma, and this guy and his father bought a property that used to be a cotton farm, and it was totally denuded from excess fertilizer and spraying, and that's how unhealthy the weeds look. They didn't go much above that. They were purple in color. You can see the purple tinge to it. Even the trees weren't growing all that well. We persuaded him to get cattle. He put cattle on 50 head, and he rehabilitated a portion of his ranch. And then he asked me, how am I going to do the rest of the ranch without losing animal performance? So I told him to get his cattle and go on walkabout. Graze where there is food,
So there he's grazing. You see this food? That's what he's grown without fertilizer, without seed, just using animal impact. He uses interns, slave labor, to move fencing on a regular basis, and that's all the interns do is move fencing and walk cattle. So the cattle, and you can see they're in good condition here, grazed until they were full. When they started to lie down, the intern got them up and made them walk down walkways, and there they are going on walkabout. So they come back midday to get some more food, and then they go and walk about yet again. Guys, you can see this is very poor. 6 months later, that's all food. There was nothing to graze there, people. They just trod it on the ground. They trod the carbon onto the soil, the kinetic energy and the symbiotic energy, sorted the soil life out. So from that in 6 months.
So that's purely from the animals moving across it.
Just from animals moving across. And you will have the added benefit of grazing it, which makes it even better. Yes, there are weeds, but you know the animals haven't read the textbooks, so don't worry about weeds. You plan for what you want, you work with what you have, and you move forward. You don't plan for what you don't want. If you get a negative thinking, you will end up in a negative situation. Yes, sir.
Sorry, I'm not from a farming background, so I might be a bit stupid, but.
No question is stupid.
So to go from that to growing grass, do you just look at the property and sort of see, okay, how much feed is actually in there, and then you decide how much cattle you buy, and you just have it in a high density to create? Because I would be worried that you buy all this cattle and you actually don't have the feed for it.
So you start small and you start
Just start
conservative.
small and just pack them up.
No, you don't. You buy, if you buy enough for conventional stocking rate,
Yeah.
I know you can more than double the stocking rate, so don't worry. So you bought your property or you leased your property, you bought X number of livestock, which is a conventional stocking rate. I'll then tell you, go to your best ground, because your best ground is going to give you the best return or biggest return for time and money invested. Run everything on your best ground with that circle that I showed you there. If you run out of food, you've got a safety net of all the other food. You do that for a year, then you can either lease out some extra ground, or you get more livestock in, whichever you want to do, relating back to your holistic goal and quality of life. Yes,
just one other thing I can sort of see. What about like the water side of things, like some places like this? If you've got fences up, not only in high densities, the use of water to stop the actual stop. Are they marching back once a day to?
No, you mean the water?
Yes.
Yes, you can make a passageway back to water if you want to. As long as you don't leave the passageway in the same place. So it's here for 2 days and it's there for 2 days and somewhere else for 2 days. But really I don't use back fences for 5 days. The last property I bought had a river running through it. The fences were all rotten, so I took them all out and I fenced the whole property with single strand electric fencing. Okay? So I'd start here, I'd put electric fence here and graze that way and then walk back to water. As long as this is not longer than 5 days in my part of the world, it might be different than yours. You've got to look what's happening, you don't want animals to regraze and overgraze here. If it's 3 days, then it might be 3 days, whatever your property tells you, so you monitor.
So we graze here, we graze here, we graze here, we graze there, then we come on this side, and we put the brakes on this side and graze there. But what has happened is, this here is now going onto the hill, and so is this here going onto the hill. So I graze here, stopping at the hill, graze here, and then I graze the whole paddock, because I need to graze this twice as much as that, because it's producing twice as much. I've now rated my paddock. So later when I give you an example of the formula, I give you straight, which means you're going to graze all that, and you're going to graze this irrespective of the rating from above the hill and down on the flat. But once you've rated it, you get twice the volume on the flat to the hill. So you graze the flat, you graze the flat, then you graze the whole thing, because the flat and the hill need to be grazed together then, because the flat is yielding double the food. You understand about the 5 days, 3 days, whichever suits you? You don't need a back fence. But once you go beyond regrowth, be careful. You're starting to overgraze. Okay. So this guy, wherever he had fixed his property, he shot trophies, and he no longer has to advertise. He is booked up for 3 years because of the sort of deer he shoots. So we go to, again in America, the government spends billions of US dollars spraying mesquite trees. All they've done there is kill a mesquite tree, okay? But they've also killed the grass and they've killed the soil. So all they've done is prepared an area for mesquite trees to grow more. So the next crop of mesquite trees are actually thicker.
And genetically superior.
Probably. They would do better to take the billions they spend and just dish it out to all the farmers, because they'd get better effect. But that's what humans do, because the politicians hold power and they use that with money, and they don't want us people on the land to make too much money, people. That's why they're not trading in carbon, because they don't want us to get out of poverty. If they traded in carbon, you would get paid out more if you graze correctly than the value of your property on the market. And governments don't want that. In Africa, they're collecting for carbon emission because it's an added tax. We already get 62 cents in the dollar tax. But they just take it for carbon emissions, but don't pay it out to anybody because they steal it all. At least your guys only steal half and leave half for you. Our guys steal it all. So that's what 3,800 head look like in 40 acres. That is the sort of stock density that I'm looking for. They were moved 4 times a day. They drink out of a cut gas tank, cut in half. He did that for 1,800 head of cattle. The same animals, the same drinking trough for 3,800 head. And the same drinking trough for 6,800 head. And yet some university student got his doctorate to prove you need so many feet per cow to drink. And imagine who financed him to get his doctorate? The guys who sell the product. I'm a skeptic, guys, but follow the money and you'll know exactly what happened.
So what was the capacity, how much water?
No, it's got nothing to do with capacity,
Yeah,
it's
no.
about delivery.
Yeah.
Forage delivery.
So you need bigger pipes.
If you haven't got bigger pipes, you've got storage next to your trough.
Yeah.
Your trough is probably plenty big enough.
Yeah.
Animals aren't humans. They don't fight for first service. They wait their turn.
So the problems that I would see with that would be in the middle of winter when it's pouring with rain and you end up with a large area of ground after the cows have gone through that is very compacted and nothing growing on it.
The animals are only there for 3 hours. So there's not compaction, and the water trough moves with the animals.
Right.
And what happens after you graze? You've got kinetic energy, you've got symbiotic energy. That soil life comes back in the soil and it froths the soil up. Compaction is animals in the same place for a long period of time. You get more compaction with 60 animals in a big paddock than you do with 6,500 animals for a short period of time.
That's that time.
Yeah.
And it's about putting the truss somewhere different next time, probably.
Every time. But the interesting part is the property he has, any bare ground he has now been planted with superior species that were never in the area prior to him around.
So in the long growing season, you need to supplement with hay.
Whatever. We'll get to that later.
Okay.
So we go to Amish country and underutilized pasture. So we put the animals, and we had enough people there to watch, that we made a human fence. So we put the animals, and it was dairy cows, jerseys, heifers, and horses, to £1 million per acre. So they're grazing the tops there, and in 20 minutes the first cow lifted her head and stopped grazing. In half an hour we moved the animals. The other horses in the herd as well. Half an hour we moved the animals, and he moved the animals every half hour. That's what it looked like behind. That the next year was superb pasture at no cost. Huge amounts of carbon, feeding the zodobacter, everything was working there, even from what was originally a bad pasture in one season. Next year it was one of his best pastures. But the interesting point was that evening, his milk was up 20%. Same area that he gave the animals every day, but just moved them every half an hour to a certain area. And what I've done is I've changed it to hectares for you to understand. Because when I'm dealing with these Americans, they're uneducated people. The only country in the world that said they were going to change and never changed. Yes, sir.
All the regenerative grazing guys talk about multiple movements, and the more often you can move them, the better. But on hill country here, moving them twice a day is hard. Moving them 4 times a day is impossible. Once a day is achievable. Are we still going to achieve results by moving the animal? Like we're bringing out a paddock size smaller hot wires, so we're increasing the density, but it's still only going to be once a day.
Andy, I believe if you guys farmed your flat area correctly, you would put animals into your steep area and never move them, just that stop them. It goes back to the holistic goal, the quality of life. What are you prepared to do? And this is the same guy who, when I first told him about moving, he got it and he moved every half hour. And 5 years later, every time I told him to move, he just said to me, he threw back what I told him, quality of life, quality of life. I said, well, don't tell me, you were the one who got married, not me.
So, what I was picking up from what you said there in the first part before the married bit.
Sorry, I'm distracted.
It was treat the back of the farm completely differently to treating the front of the farm. So I could almost winter set stock some of the back and then rotationally graze the front.
So earlier this week, I couldn't remember if it was earlier this week or last week, but anyway, we had somebody's property and he had huge ground, but most of it was, I mean, even a baboon would need a walking stick. It was that bad. So I just said to him, what are you trying to do? What do you want? How many livestock provides enough income for you to live the lifestyle you want? And of course he couldn't answer. He hadn't looked at it from that way.
So I said, well, why don't you sell the property? Oh, you have family property, you can't sell it. So I said, well, don't sell it, but lease it out. Keep your house, to your beautiful house. Keep the house and go down to your other farm and go and run there and do what you need to do, because you generate enough money. But not only that, okay, you lease it out to a guy and you're getting that static income. You don't have to exert yourself. It's just in your bank account every month. I mean, what better can you get? The problem is we don't look for the alternative. What do we really want? Well, most of us have too much car.
And that might be a good place to stop there, Ring.
What is that?
That might be a good place to stop there, contemplate over this smoker.
Okay, sir. I'm happy with what you said. That's good. Guys, stand up. John has ordered me to stop. That's good.